What the heck is that beep? Oh, that's my timer.
Yeah, your clock.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, Luke here again for another Inventor 101 webinar. Appreciate everybody being patient there while we were getting ready to get the webinar started. In case you didn't know, this is our last 101 webinar. So we've done, I think, maybe 6 or 8 of these. And it was basically just enough to kind of get you going, get you pointing in the right direction. And by no means is this a replacement for training. You want to make sure that you're going out and getting high quality training. So make sure you do that. But we are continuing the series. It's not going to be a 101 series anymore. We're going to pick really specific topics and we're going to cover that one topic in detail. And if you check your chat window, I put a link to the next webinar. So the next webinar is going to be all about sheet metal inside of Inventor. So we'll talk about sheet metal styles. We'll talk about doing multi-body sheet metal, which is relatively new to Inventor, depending on which release of Inventor you're currently running. So just be aware of that. These are going to be what I'm calling kind of like one and done webinars. We'll pick one topic, we'll talk about it. The next week we'll pick another. There'll be a whole schedule of these, so make sure you check us out on social media to look for that schedule, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, wherever it happens to be. And make sure you get registered. And we're going to jump right into it. So today we are talking, or wrapping up rather, drawings inside of Inventor. And I'm going to pop up the resource page too, for those of you that need to get your hands on the resources. That should be in the webcam window, if you have the webcam window open. But if you want to try Inventor, the trial, what's new, all that sort of stuff, make sure you do that. If you have questions as we go, ask them in the question panel, and I will do my best to answer them as we go. But back to it. So we are going to be talking about drawings and all the things we need to do to kind of wrap those up. So last week, what we did was we talked about creating different title blocks and templates and just basic drawing views. I'm going to do a super quick refresh of that. So we're just going to do an ANSI millimeter drawing. And we're going to create a couple base views, and then we will start to annotate some of our parts and assemblies and go through all the different things that we can do from an annotation standpoint. And let's open up a few, let's do it from the home, because I like going to the home view to open stuff up. That way I can see all the previous things that I worked on. So let's go with this assembly right here. There's some sub-assemblies, some weldments, some individual parts that we can work with here, and yeah, that should be a good assembly to work with. So the first thing I want to talk about is, when you're annotating your drawings, there's a couple things that you can do. So we'll just dig down into these assemblies. We'll open up this plate, and when we look at these plates and you look at the sketches, every time you do a component, you're creating sketches and you're dimensioning those sketches. You can see we have 400 millimeters by 255. Whenever we do the hole command, there's information for locating the holes. All these dimensions are in here. One of the cool things that you can do with your drawing view annotation is you can actually reference that automatically. So what a lot of folks do in Inventor whenever they're jumping in and they're just starting to do their drawings, what they'll do is they'll go to the Annotate tab here up at the top, and they just start dimensioning. And they just come in here and you pick an edge, you pick where you want the dimension to be. By default, this edit dimension when created is checked. This kind of drives me crazy because it really slows down the dimensioning process, in my opinion. But if you did want to start to add information to your dimensions, notes like typical, if you wanted to add any geometric tolerancing or any kind of annotation to it, if you want to change your justification at all, you can. You can add precision and tolerances. You can add inspection dimensions. But that doesn't happen all the time. I would say what most folks are doing is they're doing basically a drawing with just regular dimensions. And the challenge is every time you do a dimension, that dimension edit dialog box pops up. If you uncheck this, this is, a lot of people don't realize what this dialog box does, or this radio button does, but when you uncheck that, now whenever you dimension, it's just a standard dimension, and you can just continue to dimension kind of anything you want. It goes, you know, a whole lot faster than having that edit dimension dialog box pop up. So again, make sure that whenever you do that, you turn that off, because usually you're not adding all that different annotation. If you need to add something to a dimension, you can just double click on it and it brings up that edit dimension dialog box, and you can go in and add your, you know, your tolerances or inspection. We're not going to get into all those specifics today. I just want to go through some of the basics. But if you want to turn it back on, all you have to do is turn it back on. And now whenever you do any of your dimensions, that edit dimension dialog box pops back up. So just kind of keep that in mind. So we already covered a couple dimensions here. I'm going to delete some of these because we don't need them. And I just want to kind of start from scratch with some dimensioning tools. So right off the bat, underneath the dimension dialog box, we want to talk about just your general dimensioning tools. So we have general dimensioning, which is basically point to point, align, center to center, basically anything that you can snap to or click on inside of the drawing view. That's what general dimension allows you to do. Baseline dimension allows you to create baseline dimension sets, and I love these little tool tips. So if you want to know exactly what they do, it makes it really easy if you're creating a baseline dimension. And just so you understand how that works, what you're doing is you're picking where you want that dimension to start, and then all the subsequent locations where you want that dimension to occur, right click, continue, and it creates all of those dimensions with all of your spacing that you've defined and your dimension style. And it's a super quick way to do if you're doing baseline dimensioning. Because the alternative to this, if we do, and you have to make sure you hit accept or create, or else it doesn't do it. That always gets me. We'll go there and we'll continue. We'll place them, right click, create. The alternative is if you're trying to do that same thing, you have to place a dimension, click, click, let it snap, click, click. It really speeds up when you're doing that baseline dimensioning process. So just kind of keep that in mind. The baseline dimension, super quick way to do your dimensioning. And I'm just going to do some crossings in here to delete those. The other one is ordinate dimensioning, very similar to baseline, where you're picking different pieces of geometry, but it's a little different because it wants to know what view you're doing this to. So once I pick that, the first thing it's looking for is a 0, 0 point. So this is perfect dimensioning if you want to do, let's say, like a burn table, and you're going to be sending this off to someone that's going to be lasering these holes perhaps. So the first thing it's asking for is, where is the origin? So where is the 0, 0 of the part that you're ordinate dimensioning? Once you do that, you now can start to select different pieces of geometry that you want to ordinate dimension to, and I'll pick all these circles, right click, continue, and I can ordinate dimension those, and it knows when you have duplicates. So because I picked this one, and they're in that same line, it removed those duplicates. I could continue to pick these and just keep on adding those, and again, that's just giving me a duplicate set. I can hit OK, but I can also do those in a different orientation. So if I come in here and I do my ordinate dimension, that ordinate stays. I can pick my edge, my circle, my edge, my circle, continue, and depending on the direction you drag, that's when you're going to get different ordinate dimensions. If I drag up, I'm going to get those ordinates. If I drag to the right, I'm going to get those ones that I've selected. So it's a little tricky to get used to, so just kind of keep that in mind whenever you're doing the ordinate dimension. And then the last one underneath dimension, this is the chain dimension. There's always a couple different types, so you can do a set. The difference between a chain dimension set is they're treated as a single dimension when it comes to selection and deletion. So just keep that in mind. But identical to baseline dimension, you basically pick the first one, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, and the final one. Right-click continue, and it creates continuous dimensions for you. Create those, and you can see they're treated as individual dimensions, so I can just move one. The difference between this and a chain set is when I do chain set, it looks identical, create, but now these are moved and treated all together. So this really helps. Excuse me, I'm dragging my chair around in my office. This really helps whenever you are trying to organize your dimensions, because you can really easily kind of pull a dimension one way and it gets out of alignment. But you can come in here and you can take these tools and you can basically pull that out of the set. So I can lock that in place. I can move my arrowheads. You have all kinds of options inside of any one of these dimension styles, whether you're doing just a standard single dimension baseline, ordinate, or chain. Okay, so those are the basic dimension styles, and the one thing you need to be aware of when you're creating these dimensions is they all follow a particular style, and where you do that, if you go up to Manage and you go up to Style Editor, see if I can get my style editor to pop up. This is where you control, and this could be an entire class on its own, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but when you're in a drawing view and you start to create styles, this controls everything, and this is by default, the default standard ANSI millimeter, but you can control what your balloons look like, what your center marks look like. We were just talking about this, what your dimensions look like, whether they're fractional, millimeter, millimeter and inches if you're doing dual units, control frames, hatching, everything that you create inside of a drawing is stored inside of this style editor. And ideally, these styles are stored somewhere on your network, and these are shared across your engineering and design team. That way everybody is using the exact same style. You don't want different people working on drawings and having drawings that look like they were done by different organizations. So make sure that these styles get saved to network locations and that you're pooling your styles from network locations. If you need help on how to do that, you can send me an email and we can definitely get you some documentation. There's also some stuff in the help. If you just go to the Inventor help and you look up global styles, you can make sure that you follow all the procedures to do that. So make sure that you check out these styles. The defaults are all pretty good. They're usually a good starting point for you to modify and edit. Okay, so remember, if you have any questions, just ask them in the chat window, and we will do our best to answer those. Alrighty, so let's just close that. So dimensioning is pretty straightforward. Obviously, we're dealing with a square here with some circles, but what happens when you're dealing with maybe something that's a little more complex? Maybe we'll do a drawing of this subassembly inside of here. So I'll just do a new millimeter drawing, and because this assembly is the one I was in last, so I have three different Inventor files open. I have this assembly, this subassembly and this individual part, whichever one you're in last. So if I'm in this one last and then I go to the drawing, when I go to do my base view, it makes the assumption that that's the component that you want to do a base view from. I'm not sure if I said that last week when we were talking about creating base views, but you could always change what you're doing a base view of. So right here, it's showing you what file you were doing that base view of. If you had multiple files open, they show up in a list, so you could choose a different one and choose a different one and ultimately back to this one, or you could even browse out, so it doesn't even have to be a file that you have open. So just be aware of that. So we'll do a right view, a top view, and then we'll drop in an isometric view. And so now we have a much more complicated component to start to annotate. And there's only one dimension. There isn't like an angle dimension and a radius and a diameter. So there's only one dimension command inside of Inventor. Well, we have ordinate, but general dimensioning tools. So the dimensioning tools do different things depending on what you pick. So for instance, if I pick this angled line, if I drag straight down, it gives me a horizontal distance. If I drag straight to the left or to the right, it gives me a vertical distance. If I drag at an angle, basically parallel to that line, I get the straight line distance. So basically that one command is going to give me all of the different options, whether it's horizontal, vertical, or aligned dimensions. So I could put that same dimension there. I could dimension that line again and put it there. I could dimension that line again and put it there. So those same three dimensions are dimensioning the exact same line. It's just based off of where I'm dragging my cursor to. The other thing too that you notice that I'm doing is I'm not picking endpoints. You can do that. By all means, I could issue my dimension command. You can see that endpoint highlights. I could pick that endpoint. I could pick that endpoint, and I get very similar dimensions. And that's not a bad practice, but when you can, I highly recommend that you pick the geometry itself. So if I want to dimension, we'll go to this cutout here. If I want to dimension this, I could pick, again, endpoint. When I go to dimension, I could pick that endpoint there. But it's much easier just to pick the line and to place a dimension. Pick the line, place a dimension, so on and so forth. The other thing too is when you're switching between diameters and radiuses, so I can just pick a radius and it's going to give me that radius. I could pick a circle and it automatically switches to diameter, and the logic here is when it's a complete hole, it goes to diameter. Whenever it's a partial hole, it goes to a radius. But what you could do is when you're placing the diameter one, I can right click and I can go to dimension type and I can switch that to radius. So let's say you always dimension circular objects and by the radius versus the diameter, for maybe that's your dimensioning style by chance, or you just need to know that radius. Same thing with radiuses that aren't full diameters. And depending on where you drag it, you get the little extension line. But I could do the exact same thing over here. I can right click, dimension type, and not that you would ever dimension that as a diameter, but if you needed to know that diameter for some reason, there is that option. So you can always right click, and that goes for just about every dimension type. So if I'm dimensioning this line right here, I can right click and I can force it to be aligned, and it doesn't give me options to go horizontal or vertical. And this comes in handy sometimes if you're doing a part that has a lot of curved or not horizontal or flat surfaces to it, where you can just force it to be an aligned dimension. So just a couple tips.
There's a question here about not knowing that there was an auto dimension option. So how do we turn that on? Is it just clicking dimensions and then clicking through stuff, or are you able to just select everything and auto dimension it?
Yep, that's where I was going next, was with the auto dimension. Thank you. Yes, so that's the basics of dimensioning, and then we'll talk about creating center lines and how we dimension to those. But the question is, auto dimensioning. So let's go back to this drawing right here, and delete that. I want that. Yeah, we'll leave that. That's okay. So auto dimensioning, couple ways you can do automatic dimensioning. So if you do retrieve model dimensions, it's a little different than the dimension tool over here. So if you look up at the top, it's retrieve model dimensions. What it's going to do is it's going to look at your 3D model, and I'm going to pick this view right here. And it's going to say, okay, I only want certain features. I can pick the whole part. So this works at the part level or the assembly level, whichever way you want to do it. If you had 3D annotation, you can bring over 3D annotation. So inside of Inventor 2018, if you happen to be running Inventor 2018, there's some new functionality that allows you to do model-based definition annotation. So that's basically 3D dimensioning, 3D annotation on your models. It'll bring that over too, but for this purposes, we're just going to talk about the basic retrieving model dimensions. And when you see them, you're going to hit apply. The challenge here is these dimensions get placed where you put them when you created all of your 2D sketches. So they don't necessarily center themselves. You have to come in and put them exactly where you want to. And it's not that difficult, but there is some cleanup to these dimensions that you do when you bring over the annotation. So just keep that in mind when you are grabbing those drawing views or bringing over that that information. So the other thing you can do is you can actually do some additional, and this also happens right from the right click. So if you're in that particular view, let's go back to this drawing view, and I could come in here and I could do that same thing with retrieve model dimensions. So it's going to do the exact same thing because there's way more components in here that have annotation. I could do, select specific features, but I can actually pick individual components. So whatever geometry works in this orthographic view, that's where it says, orthographic. So you're not seeing every dimension for every part because in some cases they're extrusions. So just keep that in mind with the automatic dimensioning. I hope that answered your question about retrieving those dimensions automatically. If not, either send another note through and we can take that offline, or I can just answer your question via email too. So that's how you grab those automatic dimensions. Alrighty, so going back over, and I'm just using a simple part for our purposes. So another thing that we can do is we can actually automate and create center lines. So we'll delete this dimension. So center lines are pretty easy to do. You could come in here and I can create some center lines on different components. Basically, you kind of pick where you want those center lines to be. And it's going to add those center lines. Oh, I did the wrong one. That's why I did that. That was a center pattern is what that was looking for. So the regular center line, let's try that again. The regular center line, you basically just pick where you want that center to be, and it creates. Now when you're working in an orthographic view and you're looking directly at those centered holes, it's really easy to do. Whenever you're working in like a side view where you're looking at the view in parallel, what you're going to do is you're going to do a center line, and you're going to pick the top and the bottom, and it can do a, I'm sorry, hit the wrong one there. This one right here. Center bisector, you're going to pick an edge, it bisects that center line. Now this is the manual way of creating center lines. And once these are created, you can actually grab these and drag them and lengthen them. But there's always 2 or 3 ways to do things. Some are more automated than others. So the one that I like to do is I like the center line command rather than the center mark. So if you do center line and you pick different, and I undid way too many times. And we'll go to right here. The center line, when you pick a circle and you pick another circle, it actually creates a center line between those two, and I can create those, and I can continue to do that. The other thing we can do is we can do this automatically, and I don't like to do this all the time because sometimes it puts way too many center marks in, but if I right click and I do automated center lines, and I tell it what I want to do center lines of. I want to pick up holes. I want to pick up holes that are in circular patterns, rectangular patterns. I can say I want to see sketch geometry by chance. I can actually set minimum and maximums so that maybe I don't want to put center marks on really small components and I only want a certain size. That way small rounds and fillets don't get them. I can choose which projection I want to do. And when you're all done, you hit OK, and it's going to automatically do those center lines. Same thing with the side view. I can do automate center lines. And yeah, you have to make sure you turn on axis parallel here, or else it won't pick that up. The other thing too is depending on how they created the feature, it may not pick it up either. So you have cylindrical features, holes. If these were done as cylindrical features, so if you created that hole as an extrusion and did not use the hole command, it's not going to pick that up unless you turn cylindrical feature on. So be aware that these apply tos are pretty important. You want to make sure you pick up patterns, because maybe you just drew one of these and did a pattern of them, and you want to make sure that they pick up that pattern. You can hit OK, and it automates those center lines. Okay, so now that we have some center lines, you can now use these for dimensioning. So previously we were dimensioning from one object's edge to another object's edge. Just like we did with that, we can issue our dimension command, and I can actually dimension from a center line to a center line. I don't have to only dimension from geometry to geometry, so it can actually be a center line that you actually dimension to. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, they have to be there ahead of time. So just keep that in mind. Another cool thing that center lines do, and let's see if I have a one that actually does this. Let's open this component up, and I'm just going to create a real simple sketch right here, and I'm going to do a work point right about there. I'm going to issue the hole command. We'll make this a little bit bigger. There we go. And we'll do a circular pattern. I just want you to see how some of these work. There we go. And now when I go to do a drawing of this, I want to show you how the circular pattern is going to automatically get picked up. So when I do this base view, and we'll do a projected in there. So what we can do is, because we did this a couple different ways, so with this center line, if I pick multiple circles, so if I pick this circle, as soon as I pick the next one, it knows I'm doing a circular center line. And then I can come in here and take that last one and close it up. So really easy to do that manually. The other thing that I could do is, I think it'll pick it up. Let's see if it does. Let's do a circular or an automated center lines. We're going to do a circular pattern. We're going to make sure it picks up holes. We're going to make sure it picks up that. And it does, again, very similar. So the automated center lines is pretty good, but just keep in mind it's not going to grab that primary center. So you may need to just pick that center point and issue it there. And then you could grab these and pull those back a little bit if you don't like the way they're overlapping. So lots of options with center lines, and now we can even extend these down to obviously the center of our object here, and now we can dimension angular dimensions on those center lines. So you can use all that geometry once it's there to issue your dimensions. Last couple things with I think that's about it on center lines. So center lines, dimensions. Okay. Next up is the holes. So when you're working with geometry that has hole patterns and you want to annotate the hole, you could come in here and do a dimension and pick that piece of geometry and just say that that's a 24-inch or 24-millimeter diameter. But I want a little more information, and what you could do, or if you were running AutoCAD or something, you would go in here and put like typical, or you would maybe put the count in here. You would say it's 24 millimeters times whatever number. What we can do is we can actually automate this with a hole thread note annotation. So I can come in here, pick that hole. It'll actually tell me if there's a specific depth to it. If I wanted to come in here and edit this and I wanted to pick up maybe quantities, so I could actually pick up the, I can edit that quantity if I wanted to. So, number of holes in pattern or feature, number of like holes in the same view. I'm not sure if this was created with a pattern, so I'll just say number of holes in like view and hit OK and OK. And it must not think that those are like views. Quantity value. Yeah, it's not liking that. Oh, there we go. I forgot to add my quantity note. And now it knows that that occurs 8 times. And actually, I had messed that note up, so let's edit that whole note. And I did 2 of them in there twice because I wasn't sure I was actually doing it wrong. So there we go. So, and you can edit these whole notes to look any way you want. So if I go and edit that whole note, I could put the X in front of the quantity. However I want. I can add a space in here, a space afterwards. You just don't want to mess with anything in brackets typically, because that usually means it's pulling the information automatically. And now we have 24 millimeter with a depth 8 times. So the same thing is going to happen if you have punches or bends or anything dealing specifically with like sheet metal. It's going to grab that information. And if these holes had some more intelligent type information to them. So if we go back to this component right here, and maybe I add in a hole that has a little more information to this. So we'll issue our point command. We'll put that right on the center. We'll make this a hole, and we are going to do a tapped hole. And this is going to be a hole that is going to that distance, flat bottom. We're going to say through all, and let's change the size of this hole to, there we go. And now this is a hole that actually is tapped. So now when I go to my drawing here, again, it knows it's a tapped hole. When I add my hole node information, it'll actually pick up all of that information automatically for me. From that particular hole note, rather than you typing all this information in. So really easy way to retrieve that information from your 3D model automatically using that hole and thread note annotation. Next thing I want to transition to, so that's kind of the basics with dimensioning. So we got different types of dimensioning, adding our center lines. Whole notes are really important. I want to make sure that we cover text really quick, and I want to make sure that we cover balloons and bill of materials really quickly. And there's a lot of other things in here. There's weld symbols and all kinds of stuff, datums. But those are a little more, I'll say, advanced stuff. So I just want to make sure we do get to balloons and bill of materials. So when we're talking about just adding notes, there's two types of notes. One is a piece of leader text, and leader text basically connects to a particular edge. You place where you want that leader. It can have multiple legs to it. When you're done drawing the leg, like if for some reason I had to do this in two different directions, I could. You just pick again, right click, continue, and it creates that little dog leg that you need. So don't just click, 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 or you end up with a piece of leader text that has all kinds of segments to it. So this is basically your editor. So you can very easily just, whatever information you want to put in here. If there was some kind of specification that they needed to follow, you can add annotation, you can add symbols in here, you can put this on a specific layer. There's all kinds of things you can do. That you can bold this, italicize this, center, justify it. There's all kinds of things you can do. It's basically a word processor that you're working within. So just kind of keep that in mind. You can add bullets. You can remove those bullets if you don't want to have bullets. So really easy to work with. You can do numbering. So nothing special here whenever you're doing this. The only thing that you can do if you want to is you can pull in parameters. So way early on, I think it was maybe the first class, we talked about parameters. So if you do have parameters that you wanted to pull in or reference, there's all different parameters that you could create. So length, depth, whatever you create as a parameter, you can reference those if you have them built in. This model doesn't happen to have any parameters like that. When you're all done, you hit OK, and you can actually drag these around to be kind of wherever you want them to be when you're positioning them. So that's leader text. Regular text, this is exactly what it sounds like. You basically pick a window and you're basically doing the exact same thing but without a leader. So a cool thing that you can do in here is if you want to bring in text that you've formatted in like a Word document. So let me see if I have a Word document that I can share with you. Yeah, so this is just a script for a video that I was working on earlier. So I'm just going to take it and I'm going to cut and paste it from Word, and that information is going to get put in there. I can come in here and format this more if I wanted to. I can change the font, I can bold it, italicize it, underline it. Everything you can basically do in Word, you can actually do in here. One caveat, it does not have a spell checker. So I don't know about you, but I am an absolutely horrible speller, and so I always recommend when you're working with any kind of text inside of Inventor, and it's probably just me because I'm a bad speller, that you do all of your typing in like a Word document. Make sure it's spell checked exactly the way you want it to be, and then you actually drop that in, because no matter how poorly I spell the word assembly, it's not going to tell me that that is incorrectly spelled. So, so just keep that in mind when you are putting that in. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about in the last 5 or 10 minutes or so here, and again, any questions, please ask them in the question panel. And I did see someone ask a question. It looked like they were looking for last week's webinar. If you go to the YouTube channel, or you follow us on Facebook, or you follow us on Twitter. That's the best way. I don't know, James, if you could maybe grab the Inventor 101 playlist potentially, or I could actually grab it and just put it in the chat window. Actually, I could probably grab that. So let's go over to, I probably have quicker access to it than you do, James. So, so if I go there and I go to my channel, and yeah, so the channel that you want to, or the playlist that you want to check out is the Inventor 101 playlist, and I'll just put this in the chat window. And this is all of the Inventor, so let's go to chat and put it there. So that's the YouTube playlist right there for the Inventor 101 series. I think that last week's I might still need to upload. I may have uploaded. I got to double check, but that's all the Inventor 101 videos if you want to check them out on the YouTube page. Okay, last thing, bill of materials and balloons. So ballooning is super simple, and basically you just decide if you want to do individual balloons or auto balloon. I highly recommend you do automatic ballooning unless you have relatively small assemblies and you find it easy to do it just one by one. But what we're going to do is an auto balloon, and it's going to be view specific. So I can actually pick individual things in here. I can have it ignore multiple instances. That's typically the default. So if you have multiple components, they don't show up twice with different balloon numbers, or they don't show up twice in your bill of materials. So that's typically turned on. But I'm just going to do a window and cross over everything in that view. You can choose how you want that. You can choose how you want that to be structured, so it can be parts only, and there's some legacy options in here. But typically you want it structured, and what that means is if it's a subassembly, it'll call out the subassembly as one component. It won't drill down in to individual parts. So if I do parts only, it's going to call out every single component that's in here, even if it's a subassembly at this level. Hopefully that makes sense. But typically you want to do structured bill of materials, and you can choose how you want to place it. I'm going to do around, and I am going to select my placement. And now what I can do, wow, that's weird. Let's try that again. It was getting all, let's see if that does that again. It could be my assembly too. So let's do structured around. Yeah, it was just a little glitch there. So I can pick where I want them. I can do horizontal. If I want them all in one place, I can do vertical. It actually looks pretty good. Let's do vertical. That's where I want them. I can hit apply, and then there's all of my components automatically called out. Now, it looks like these are kind of in a wonky order, and that's because I chose a structured bill of material, and this falls into a higher level assembly. So sometimes, you know, these may not look exactly how you want them to. If I back that up and I do balloons, and I pick that view, I pick my components, and I do parts only, and I'll do my vertical placement. You can see this is more of your traditional, there's number 1, there's number 2, there's number 3. To move a balloon, you just pick and hold and drag it to where you want to drag it to. A pretty cool thing too that these do is, you see how it's touching that edge? If I move this balloon, see how that's number 8? If I take this balloon here and I move it from here to there, it renumbers itself. So by default, if you go edge to edge, it can't be wrong. Here's where you can get messed up. If I take it from that edge and I put it on that face, it doesn't know anything because there's nothing there. You have to actually have it touch the face first to pick up the reference. Then I could move it to be on that surface. I've seen people get messed up with that, where they say, oh, that's number 13, and that's not number 13 anymore. Well, you need to move it to that edge first. It picks up the reference, then I could move it to that face. Move it to that edge, it picks up the reference, then I can move it to that face and it stays the reference. The best practice is leave it on an edge. That way you don't get messed up with how you are doing your ballooning. And then the very last thing I want to do, I know we're getting short on time here, the last thing I want to make sure we do is place a parts list or a bill of material. So the bill of material is, again, going to do this. The way I chose to do the balloons is parts only, so it's going to do that same parts only. I can do my table direction. I can have it enable automatic wrapping. There's all kinds of options here. You're going to hit OK. It's going to snap that upper right-hand corner. And there is your information automatically pulled from your drawings, any quantities you have. And the one thing I want to talk about with quantities real quick is occasionally you'll have a component that is, the quantity is not a number, it's a length. So if it's perhaps a piece of structural steel, you want to know the total length of structural steel you need, not how many pieces of structural steel you need. So that's where the quantity value you would set in that individual component to be the length rather than the quantity, and then it automatically grabs that information. And there's all ways to, you know, roll that up into a total value. But that is the basics for your annotation. So just a quick recap, we talked about dimensioning, hole and thread notes, some annotation with text and leader text. We talked about our center lines and our balloons and our bill of materials, and there is a ton of other stuff inside of Inventor for, you know, documenting and, you know, making these super, you know, detailed drawings. I just wanted to give you enough to get you going, and if you have any questions, please send me an email and I will do my best to get back to you via email. If you have any suggestions on future webinars, now that we're going to this one and done series, 2 weeks from now, because we're taking next week off, 2 weeks from now we're doing sheet metal. But if you wanted to see maybe something on, you know, making parts for plastic production, I have a mold flow expert that I could bring on and help us go through you know, how to prep your 3D models for something like mold flow, or maybe model preparation for simulation. So there's all kinds of ways to actually, you know, let me know what you're interested in, whether it's email, hit us up on social media, and we'll be happy to get, if I don't know it, we'll get some other folks to step in and answer some questions for you. So very good. Pedro, thank you. I will be doing sheet metal in 2 weeks. Make sure you sign up. And if anybody else has any questions, just, you know, send me an email, hit me up on social media. Here is, I'll go real quick just so you see it in case you haven't been there before. Here's all my social media info, so you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can directly hit me up on Facebook at Inventor_Luke. It's probably one of the better ways to, if you had some cool stuff you wanted to share, images. I love sharing people's stuff. But it's been a pleasure being with you folks for the past couple of weeks, and next week is off. 2 weeks of sheet metal. Have a great week. See everybody later.